And in terms of like working hours, I know that the investment banking or even investing, it can have there are lots of myths around the hours that you work in a day. Could you maybe I don't know, bust anything, or maybe tell them if they're true? Like, what would a typical day look like from start to finish?
Sure, of course. I mean, I've gone through, I think, the whole spectrum of what you can do, starting with investment banking, where, the body has a very happy way of forgetting, like pain. And I have very fond memories of those years. I definitely think they were worthwhile and very meaningful, and I had a lot of fun. But I definitely worked very, very hard those years. And I think that's something that a lot of people have in them when they're just out of university and you're starting off and you're super excited about kind of really establishing yourself, but it's obviously not, the life that you want to live long term. Definitely not for me, at least. So I'm very happy to say that that is not how I work today. I would say for us, it's more about quality over quantity of hours. So in terms of what I spend my days doing, I would maybe split it in three kind of buckets. One is I try to find and source new investments, and I speak with founders of those companies. And then once we invest, we obviously also spend a lot of time with the companies that we have invested in to make sure that the companies are developing as we want and that we support them in whatever way is best for them. And then thirdly, I would put kind of everything miscellaneous in terms of developing my firm, so J12 as a platform. So we have a lot of different programs. We just launched an AI Catalyst program for companies as an example, which is a 6-week accelerator program for companies where we have a lot of super interesting advisors on board. So, teeing up that program, teeing up advisors, et cetera, it's obviously also something that I spend time on. But within all these three work streams, the effort and focus is really on the quality, as I said, not on, ever showing that you've compiled a list of 3,000 companies, whereas in reality, it's just finding that one nugget that makes most sense. So now I have very good work-life balance. I work very, very traditional hours. I would say when things really kind of go live, let's say, within a year, we make maybe, depends a little bit on the market environment, but let's say, 5 to 10 investments or something along those lines. And within those moments where you're just about to kind of sign or hopefully win a new investment, that can obviously be a little bit of a sprint to get that across the line, because new investment processes tend to go quite quickly in VC, especially the best companies. They're very competitive to get into. So then you have to like roll up your sleeve and learn about a new industry in just a few days and get comfortable. But I would say that's fun, like stress and excitement, almost like when you're, I don't know, at a hackathon trying to solve a problem and you're like, oh, we're so close, we're doing it, rather than like, oh, dreading like just another day of working really hard. So it has its ups and downs, but overall I would say work-life balance is very good.
I think it's good that you mentioned that. There will be periods of very intense sort of working hard, and as you mentioned, you're a bit further into your career now, and you've kind of found what you really wanted long term, which is good for students to know. I think that it's not going to always be so linear all the time. In what ways would you say that you find your work and your job meaningful?
We touched on some of these things, but I think, at a higher level, just thinking more about like society as a whole and the role that investors play, particularly the job that I do, I mean, we're at the forefront of really supporting innovation. So without capital, these new ideas and new businesses, they would not be able to like succeed, get funded and be built. And that can be everything from kind of more, research or, healthcare related projects to, building the next Apple or Amazon or whatever it might be. So I think that is hugely exciting and motivating to kind of be part of that change that eventually will lead to, long-term economic growth and a good society and all of these things. And during that journey, you're also empowering people, right? So you truly have the right to kind of select who gets funded and who doesn't. And I think as an investor, you have a voice in companies' development, which means you can also drive an agenda. So things like diversity, which we're obviously very passionate about, again, which is still lagging behind in both the investment world, but also the kind of company founder world. That's something that you can really put pressure on companies when you are an investor. So I think all of those aspects of, maybe I would put them in a bucket of like achieving change, is to me super motivating. And then on a more personal level, as we discussed, I think it's just that continuous learning aspect. Like there's really no like typical day at work. You're constantly learning about something new, which also makes it super exciting if I look forward, like 10, 15, 20 years from now, and ask myself whether I still think this would be fun to do as a job. There's always a new aspect of it. There's always new interesting people. There's always new innovation and things like that. So those are the things that motivate me.
And also, I'm guessing working with Gain as well, and pioneering change in this way as well. It can be, I can imagine, it can be very rewarding on that side as well.
100%. Yeah.
And what about the options for career progressions? Would you say that in terms of career progressions, what are the options for people to move up in this industry?
Sure. So typically a venture capital firm, and I would say it's mostly true for most investment firms, you start off maybe like an analyst, and then you progress to an associate, vice president, principal, and then eventually a partner. So many of these funds, I work for a fund, we raise money, and then you have a partnership, which is the key kind of the most senior people within a firm that kind of own and manage the firm as a partnership. So that's kind of the, just a pure hierarchy in terms of like titles. I would say in terms of the types of tasks, everyday work streams that you do and how that changes over time. I mean, obviously, when you just start, you're going to be doing more analytical work, more research work, et cetera, et cetera. But I think in contrast to some other parts of the investment world, that is maybe a little bit more formal in the sense of how you run a process and exactly what role you play in an investment process. Within VC, at least, you get a lot of responsibility from day one. So our analysts and associates, they definitely within just a week of joining, they take their own calls, they meet companies on their own, and you're expected kind of from an early stage to form an opinion about things, have a view on companies, and also then have a view internally whether you think this is something that we want to be pursuing or not. But obviously, as you mature and become more senior, that responsibility on you to kind of be able to lead an investment from the very early phase of sourcing a company to researching the company, winning the investment, which actually is harder than you think in the very best companies, and then coming to a decision internally whether you should invest, how much you should invest, etc., etc. You kind of take on more and more responsibility over that until you effectively own that entire process. So there's a clear line of progression, but I would say you get a lot of responsibility already from an early stage.
So you just keep building from, yeah, okay, that's good. Could you maybe talk about any subjects that you would need in order to get into investing?
From the perspective of how you can get into the job, because obviously, again, we spend a lot of time talking about investing jobs, but actually there's only a certain ratio of investment firms that actually hire graduates. So maybe let's spend just a second like breaking down some of the common paths that you can do to get into investing, and then back that up with what you can study at university or what you can do in your kind of spare time to enhance your ability to land one of these jobs. So specifically, I would say, at least in VC, there's two kind of paths that you can go to get into investing. One is the more kind of traditional path, and that I went down, and we spoke a little bit about earlier. So that would be joining an investment banking firm or joining a consultancy firm, as an example. I think those types of places, they typically provide you with good kind of straight off university, work experience, very structured. You learn a lot. The pace is very high, but I also think, to be honest, they often serve as a bit more of a recruitment filter, because they do very rigorous recruiting assessments. I think if you've been to work for one of the best investment banking firms or a consultancy firm, it means you pass that kind of needle in a haystack assessment. And that in itself is something that investment firms like to rely on. But that is only the traditional way. And I think now more than ever, it's really changing. And working for starting a company, in particular in venture, is becoming an even more common path and something that's very rewarded. And I think the background in particular in that is, if you think about what you're actually doing as a venture capital investor, you're assessing companies, but you're also helping them to grow, and you're meant to assist with all the pain points that a company goes through. So if you've worked at another company before and you've experienced some of these pain points and you've experienced the growth journey, then you have just more to add to that company in terms of what you can bring it to the table. So entrepreneurs tend to really like if you as an investor have been at a company. So I often get this question from young people that are just out of university trying to decide which path they should go. I think it's almost more a personality question, like what you feel you get more energy from, but both are equally as relevant. And then specifically just on, what you should be studying or doing on your spare time, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, obviously, if if you're in school and you're thinking about what to apply for at uni and you're already interested in business, then of course you can study something business or economics related. But there's absolutely nothing that says that you have to study anything of that sort to be an investor. It's one of the most common myths we try to debunk at Gain. And particularly women, I think, tend to think that, to be able to apply to a job or to do well at a job, you need to have studied the right subject or have acquired all the relevant learning beforehand. And that's just not true. But there's a wealth of other ways that you can get up to speed on the industry and the types of investments that you would like to do in your spare time by reading books, reading articles, research reports, et cetera, et cetera.